Hey everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining me, and welcome if this is the first time you're tuning into Figure It Outie. Hi, my name is Steve, and here we work on the S4. I have an S8. There's another new car in the fleet that you haven't seen quite yet, and I have an A4 B8. But today is the final installment, episode 6 of the S4 Redemption series, where I've been working very fastidiously on the 25 Quattro S4. Ever since going to the dyno about this time last year, where I posted up some pretty not so great numbers, and it gave me reason for pause and to go check into a bunch of things. And the long story short of the playlist that's right here is that the car's fine. It is a little low on compression on 2 cylinders, but by and all, it's really doing quite well. Therefore, in this episode, I just get to have some fun. I am going back to the dyno in a couple of days, and I have myself a Dragy to install to get some other types of performance data. But of course, if you're going to put your car through that type of torture, because it is pretty hard on the engine to run it up to redline over and over again, we got to do a little preventative maintenance and make sure that everything is safe to do that work. For the record, it's like the middle of October now, which is really good in the sense that it's going to be cold ambient temperatures, which is good for making power. But it's also the last time I'm going to be shooting any kind of videos in the garage in shorts and a t-shirt. In fact, that heater in the background, already turned it on for the first time today. And if you're an Albertan or anyone else that lives in the prairie provinces in Canada, you know that Halloween is your drop dead date for everything related to summer. You know, summer cars got to go away. House and yard projects got to be wrapped up. You probably have to anticipate snow on the ground for Halloween, so I'm already against the clock here. Now, before you go to the dyno, there is truly a litany of things that you really should be checking to make sure that you have a successful day. Everything around your ignition system, fueling system, make sure that the air intake and exhaust is good. Everything that gives you a nice strong engine. Go over it with a fine-tooth comb. Now, I have done this within the last few thousand kilometers because I don't drive the car that much, and I've been working on a whole bunch of things this summer. So I get to skip a whole lot, but just know that I have very fresh fluid in the transmission and the rear diff. My spark's good. Obviously, I've got the new Jackal intake system on there. I've checked my intake manifold for the flap functioning. I'm just good on a whole lot of levels. So what I'm going to focus on is protecting my oiling system. What I want to do is an engine oil flush, and I'm going to be using as much Liqui Moly products as I can because I love their stuff. And I will explain more about why these products are sitting in the bench in a second, but we're not doing a cleaning. We're just flushing the oil itself. And I already have taken the old oil out because it's boring, and you've done an oil change before, and you don't need to see that. But what I do want to show you, hopefully in the blurriness at the bottom here, you can see that there's just a whole lot of old dark oil in there. And you know what? That's going to be the case for all the little crevices in the car. Even with one draining and filling up with new stuff, you're still going to have a ton of old stuff in there. So that's why we're going to do a middle step. So first of all, I'm not using the engine flush product. I want to call it out because if I were, I would have had to put that in with my old dirty oil first. That's what you're supposed to do. You take a whole can of this, put it in your old oil, run it for 10-15 minutes through the car at operating temperature, just in the garage. You don't have to go for a drive or anything. Dump all of that out, drain it, and then fresh filter in, fresh fluid in, and you're done. That's that whole process. I'm not doing that, not because I don't think the car could benefit from it, but I just don't think it's that dirty. I don't have anything to clean out. I just want to strengthen the motor. Now, when it comes to protection, it's when you want to turn to something like this. This is Liqui Moly's Ceratec product, and I actually have 2 cans of this stuff in the car right now. That's just proportionally how much I need because I have about 11 liters of oil capacity in the car because these cars take a ton of oil, and I have the external oil cooler now, which adds to that as well. Anyways, even before I knew about the bore scoring and presumable ring wear that I found out this summer when I was doing my diagnosis, I already kind of had an inclination that the engine was a bit tired in general, and I knew there was probably little cracks and crevices that needed to be strengthened, which is what this product does. Now, here is a video from FCP Euro where somebody from Liqui Moly dropped in and explained what all their additives do, and he does a great job of explaining everything about the products I'm going to use today, so just go watch that. But suffice to say, there is a chemical compound in Ceratec that strengthens the metal components that it's touching and leaves a little film layer on it, which is great. And that does stick around after you drain the fluid out. But when you drain it, there's a second component, a solid component, that leaves the system. So if you're in my position where you're running Ceratec some of the time, but you want to reinvigorate the system with those lost solids, that's when you would use their other product like MOS2. This is just another anti-friction agent, and I'm going to add a couple of cans of this in on my final fill up to make sure that I still have that strength and protection when I hit the dyno. You can actually get a 4-pack of this stuff, which brings down the cost to like 13 bucks a can or something on Amazon. I'll put the link to that in the description of this video so you can check it out. But honestly, even if you're not doing any of these activities that I'm about to do in this episode, you should just use additives. It's like cheating. It's steroids for your car. You may as well do it. You never know when you take a hard corner and maybe oil pressure drops for a second, or who cares what's going on in your engine. It's such a cheap insurance policy. You just run this stuff. So let's have some fun and do some unscientific science. What I'm going to do is grab an oil sample out of the old oil that just came out, And of course we have our filter that it was paired with right here. And I'm going to put in and do my flush here with a fresh filter. And then once that is drained out, I will show you another sample of both of those items. And then of course, new oil is going to be perfect, but I'll grab a sample of that too. And you'll see the difference between old, a flush, and then final. Show and tell time, and right off the bat, I'll point out that the flush sample looks damn near just as dark as the stuff that came out before, the really old stuff. This is thicker and it is darker because there's sort of like long-term sludge built up in there. But I bet you would have thought that this would have been a lot lighter, like the new stuff, than it is. It really goes to show that you could probably take a new filter, keep it in the car, and just do flushes over and over and over again. I don't know how many times it would take a new oil to get flushed through to make your samples look any closer to something that's new, but it would be a lot. Filter wise, you can tell it's just sort of saturated. There's not a whole lot in there. I'm not going to cut it open. I have no reason to believe that I'm searching for metal particles or otherwise anything that would have got caught in the filter. I just can't run it with no filter in this process. So you can tell that it's basically like brand new, just saturated and not really that dirty. And this is what it looks like after like 4,000 kilometers. Last, I did put in about a can and a half of the MOS2. I didn't mix these samples together because this is like a dark, dark gray, and I'd really be screwing up my non-scientific process here because it'd probably end up looking just as bad as the old stuff. But this whole process of an oil flush and fill is done. Before the car went back on the ground, I did do a nut and bolt check down there, and everything's good, minus one issue that I admit has been sort of growing over the last couple of months. It's not something I need to fix for the dyno because it's not that type of problem, but there is a groan, a creak coming out of the steering. Low speeds, turning left or right, doesn't really matter. I don't know if it's the power steering rack, I'm not low on fluid or anything, or control arm bushings, not totally sure what's out of whack right now, but it's getting louder and it's sort of unnerving. Now, keep in mind the car is lowered on an old set of the Stasis Olins, which are fantastic, but no other control arm has been replaced. And typically you do want to correct for the geometry of your control arms when you lower your car, because whereas everything used to be, let's just say, in its copacetic, sort of static state, when you lower the car, everything kind of gets like pitched a little bit, and you can get adjustable control arms, certain ones anyways, to sort of bring it all back into balance and avoid things like bump steer and just like bad driving characteristics. So I don't know if I'm just due for a refresh here or what, but that's going to be a next year problem. Back to the fun stuff, Dragy install time. Now, if you don't know what a Dragy is, I'm sure you've already seen what a Dragy does on the internet. You've probably seen these videos that look like it's dash cam footage, and there's a heads up display put over it that has, 0 to 60 times, quarter mile, eighth mile, full mile, the 60 to 130 mile per hour, and someone's reading it out and just gives you the times of how fast you're going. That's what this is. So it's the combination of an app and this GPS unit. Because this is GPS based, it means it's quite accurate, but also that you can use it anywhere. Now, because I'm on YouTube, I feel the need to be a little bit responsible here in my messaging, so I'll say, yes, this is something you would drive to Mexico for. Make sure that you're in an open spot, no one's around. Give yourself some room to experiment with the car and make sure that you're being safe while you're getting these times. But it does mean that you don't need to go to a drag strip, let's just say, and use the timing system there. You can get your own numbers from Dragy. Inside of the box, you get a charging cord, not shown here, and your Dragy, which is actually quite small. It's only the size of your index finger or so, and it is magnetic, which is important because these strips are as well. There's just a little 3M adhesive on the back, so you can stick this on your windshield or dash or wherever is convenient to you, but when it's time to charge, you just pop it off and charge it on the bench. Now, I just installed mine. I've elected for maybe a more discreet position. Can you see it? I'll give you a second. Right up here, secret spot. What I did was I put it behind the tinted part of my OE glass. This way it's really out of the way. It's actually not facing the sun because these things can melt batteries, as Dragy's own instructions say. And I can see the status light up on the left there. And I just don't like having anything on the dash. I like a nice clean sort of view at the front, and it gives me the ability to clean the dashboard really easily still too. I'll set up my phone mount in a second so that you can get that cool view out the front windshield when I do a run. But really you can get going right away just by opening the app, hitting connect, and it'll connect through Bluetooth to the nearest found Dragy, and it'll load up some satellite information before you get going. And once that's done, you'll have things like ambient temperature, your elevation, and your Dragy will be flashing blue, meaning it's ready to go. You know, it sure is handy how it seems like Mexico is bordering all the places that we live, so you can just drop in whenever you want. So I'm just gonna go grab my 0 to 60 and quarter mile times. It's all I need to benchmark the S4 against what a stock S4 should be putting down. You know, I know I'm slightly modified, so I should have a slight advantage, but it really doesn't matter. And my 60 to 130 mile per hour times definitely don't matter. I don't have a turbo. I'm not playing in that, even close to that league right now. So that's okay. You're just gonna see me using my Jackal Tune launch control. I'll do it with the cruise control stick pulled towards me, which means it's the lower limiter, should be around about 5,000 RPM. Just dump the clutch and off we go. Okay, you know what? I humbly shared that video with you in full transparency because that's what I do here. But until you get your own Dragy and post your own numbers for me, you don't get to talk shit about how bad that might have been. So lots of lessons learned right there. It was a fun time, but I ran out of space to do a quarter mile. Honestly, I don't really need it because I already have the one important piece of information to know that the car's fine. And I can feel comfortable about whatever happens at the dyno session coming up. Because I put down essentially, you know, let's just call it 5.4, which is exactly what the car was rated to do from the factory. Yeah, for sure. I could squeeze way more time out of there. Didn't get a perfect launch. And what I really learned is because of the gear ratios here, if you string out all of first and second gear, you should be hitting 60 miles per hour at the top of second. I'm losing so much time as I'm taking the time to like clutch in, shift up into third. I'm basically like coasting through those last few miles per hour while I get back into power and push it over 60, which is just ridiculous. So really you should be seeing, especially on a stage one, like really high 4 seconds or like very, very low 5 seconds. Shout out to everyone though who does drag racing. I now have like a glimmer of insight into how hard that world is. You know, you got to nail those shifts, line up just right, make sure your launch is just perfect. There's definitely ways to shave tenths and hundredths of a second off all the time. I see you. Like I said though, I kind of don't care what's about to happen now on the next dyno session because based on the 060 alone, I know that the engine is performing as it should. So if I see something a little weird, I'll just keep this in the back of my head and we'll figure out what to do from there. Good morning. It is dyno day finally, and it's always sort of a nerve-wracking day when you strap your car to the dyno and put it through its paces, but we're ready because of the stuff that I did before this point. I'm back at Triple S, same place that I was here, same time last year too. And again, it's a pretty chilly day, which is good for power. I'd say it's maybe like just under 10 degrees Celsius right now. So that should be pretty decent, but we're just gonna do some baseline pulls today. Last time I was here, I was playing with the tune. We're doing a little before and after. Today, it's just to see what our numbers are. Here we go, this is pull number 1. Well, it looks like we're in the exact same position we were last year. Check this out. So what we're still seeing is we're low, right? So we've got 220 this time, and we're up to 270 in torque, but the curve is still exactly what we saw last time. We've got our low end torque, which makes sense right here, but this should be way higher and it should build all the way up. So it appears that once again, this is a wash. I'm gonna have to go back to the drawing board. We're gonna blow out 2 more runs here just for fun, and then we're just gonna go check out the shop. So second run resulted in a little bit of a pickup. We see the tune adapting just for wide open throttle while it's on the dyno. So we're up by 8 horsepower, and looks like about 5 pounds of torque. So slight improvements, but you know, we're not going to see anything different than this today. Last run, just for fun. Sounds good. Once again, we picked up a little bit of power. That time, 3 more horsepower, and torque jumped up. Well, that's pretty good actually, maybe 4. So it was growth. That's the tune doing its thing. So shout out to Jackal and their programming. You know, the car's always looking to pick up power when it's under the conditions to do so. But that's all we got for today. Back at HQ, it's actually a couple days into the future. I'm having an evening working session out here in the garage on something I'll tell you in a second. But I've had some thoughts, so let me run you through what's going on. Number one, here is the dyno graph from SSS the other day. I just want to call out a couple of things. One, it is SAE corrected. Number 2, they run a J correction, which means something to their type of dyno, which is number 3, a Dynacom dyno. Now, every manufacturer of a dyno and people who have dynos at their shops, they're all going to say that their dyno is the most accurate compared to everything else because of X, Y, and Z. And you know what? In their own perspectives, I'm sure that's true. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the dyno or the configuration of the dyno at SSS, but what I want to do is just see what another dyno would read. I think that's kind of what I need at this point. I feel still really good about the car itself, and there's nothing leading me to believe that there is a problem, but I just need more data. Now, there's only so many all-wheel drive dynos in Edmonton, but there is another one that I'm going to be going to in a couple of days that has a Mustang dyno. And I'm not trying to inflate or contort my numbers here, but I do feel like it's got more in it than what we've been seeing. So I just want basically a second opinion, and we need to share data with each other on the internet because we're all going to different shops that have different dynos. And as long as we can detail very carefully what types of dynos that we're running on, things should get a little bit more apples to apples, because I think a lot of you online that have logged your graphs before are on like Dyno Jets or Mustang dynos, and you are simply just not seeing the numbers that I am, and vice versa. So let's just add more data to the conversation here and see where we get. Meanwhile though, on the way home after the last session, I noticed a bit of a rattle, which is the scariest adjective you can use around these S4s, because usually it means a timing guide has gone and your chain is slapping around, either up towards the timing covers or down lower behind the engine with those really big chains and guides. And, you know, I'm kind of on the fence. I don't want to go to another dyno session if the engine is just obviously hurt and is going to explode instantly. That's a waste of everyone's time and money. But at the same time, I kind of feel like no matter what, this engine is going to have to get rebuilt pretty soon. And whether I pull it preventatively and do the timing, like I already know I have bore scoring in there and there's things that need to be done. And if the timing does explode on the way, well, what? I bend a couple of valves in a head that I'm going to have to rebuild anyways, and damage some pistons that I'm going to end up throwing out because I'm going to be doing a sleeve and a build anyways. Like, kind of what's the difference, right? Anyways, I figured I would just go ahead and pull my valve covers, take a look behind the heads, because you can actually see about 3 guides pretty good on the top and the back on both sides, which is like a little over half of the guides that are back there anyway. So I'll never know if the bigger ones at the bottom are damaged. You simply can't borescope that low. But, you know, let's take a look. A couple hours of work later, and granted I've got some advantages. Just the fact that I have no big air box there and I can just yank out the Jackal intake in one piece. Gives me all this working room on both sides. And ultimately what I wanted to do was check out the guides down at the back. So right under the chain, you can see we've got this guide on the top that's plastic. It's in good shape, so is the one on the other side. And if you take your borescope and run a line down the very edges on both sides, you can see 2 more down there, and they're in fine condition. So the fact that maybe 60% of my timing system is verified okay, that gives me enough confidence. I also ran VCDS before I took the engine apart to see what my blocks 91 through 93, just like I did in the last video. You can check out right here how to check your timing adaptations on your cam gears. And those looked fine too. In fact, the numbers hadn't even changed since last time. No other errors. I'm not getting misfires. There's no other like telltale signs of timing problems. So I'm going to just cross my fingers that that rattle was nothing of concern, and at least I can survive 3 more pulls. So I'm gonna put this back to work, and the next time you see me, I will be at a new dyno. I'm with my new pal, Matt Lee, and he'll talk to you in a second about what's going on here with the dyno. But today's going to be a big one. So we're looking for two things here. One, I want to see if the curve changes on these charts, right? So as a recap, we're seeing a little bit of power drop off on horsepower on the top end, which just doesn't make sense for a V8. And then the numbers themselves are suspiciously low. So we're going to validate today what's going on with a different dyno setup here. But I'll let Matt talk about that a little bit more.
My name's Matt, and I'm a custom dyno tuner here in Edmonton. Mostly work on Japanese cars, but I dabble in European and domestics as well. I've tuned on a Dynocom before, and I've noticed that the numbers do seem to be a little bit lower than this particular dyno. You could have the exact same dyno next door, and ultimately the potential for it to spit out a different number is there. I would say 80 to 90% of dynos are all fudgeable, if you will. So yeah, as long as you can get repeatable results and see differences with your tuning changes, it's ultimately just a tool, right? So there's more or less two different types of dynos. There's the inertia type dyno, like a dyno jet, and then there's the like load-based dyno. And so how like a load-based dyno works is there's a load cell at the end of the dyno there, and ultimately the load cell is calibrated to a certain amount of torque, and that's how you get your horsepower and torque rating. A dyno jet is more or less just a big drum, and the dyno jet software knows how much the drum weighs, how quick it's accelerating, and ultimately that's how it figures out horsepower and torque. So how your number gets spit out in the software is a little different.
We've hit pay dirt. Check this out. So finally, we're seeing the curve that I actually would have expected to see. So we've got power all the way up. We're only running it to 7,000, but if we want, we could run a little higher. Keep in mind, this is third gear still, but we see that torque, heavy at the beginning, actually kind of stays on to the end, and power just all the way up. So run one, we're down here. We're at 322 and 334 power. So what we're basically seeing is that the curves are very much repeatable, and we picked up 2 horsepower basically right at the very top there, but now we know that the car is doing what it's supposed to be doing. And keep in mind, this once again was a third gear pull. So now that we verified the power and torque levels with those 2 pulls, what we're gonna do is just bump it up to the standard 4th gear pull, and let's see what impact that has on the chart. We finally have the numbers that I always knew the car actually had. Take a look at the graph. What you're looking at the bottom here, so run 3 isn't actually chronologic, it's actually the first run, second run, and this was the most recent one here. So you can tell that in 4th gear, which is typically what people run the power pulls on, what we finally saw was torque 330, power 355. And you can also see the difference between what happens here when you do a 3rd gear versus 4th gear pull. So the red one is the most recent one. You can see that because of the gearing, You see a little bit more on the top end, which is where your peak power is going to come from, and really makes up for the difference that we're seeing right there. And you keep the torque a little bit higher, a little bit longer as well, but this is exactly the shape of the graph that I knew should always really be there. If anyone wants to find you in Edmonton to do dyno services like this or do some tuning, how do they find you?
The best way to get a hold of me is through Instagram. My handle is right here. And yeah, just shoot me a DM and we can talk.
Wow, really fun day, really good episode, really good series here, lots to reflect on, and I will in a second, but first, so you can analyze till your heart's content, here are the two main charts that I'm pulling from this dyno session. Here are all the comparison ones with the first two runs in third gear, final one in fourth, and then the isolated final fourth gear run right here. The first really big takeaway is that not all dynos are the same. They differ in so many ways, I'm sure many of which I still don't even close to understand, but it seems like if you're going to go run your car in a dyno and you want to compare your results, compare it to the same type of dyno. Because what we've learned is that, physically the machines might be different. Sometimes they directly measure the output of a vehicle, like the torque, and sometimes they're using another metric and a calculation in the software to ascertain what that actual metric is. So it's really tough to compare one to another. But there's also probably no way to do it perfectly anyways. I'm sure you've seen on YouTube once in a while there's like high performance engine building shops, and before they actually put the engine into a car, they'll strap the engine to just like an engine dyno. So you can run an engine like it's a heart outside of the body essentially, and feed it coolant and oil and all that good stuff and rev it out. That's how you measure crank horsepower anyways. And unless you did that and then took the engine, put it in a car, took that car, put it on a dyno and then measured it, you're never even going to know what the actual accessory power loss and drivetrain loss is. So it's kind of like, if you're going to go have fun on the dyno, that's cool, but don't try to compare yourself if you're on a Mustang dyno to a dyno jet or a dyno jet to a Dynacom. It's just like too different. So for me, one of my lessons is be humble about your dyno numbers. It's a great benchmark against yourself if you want to do modifications and bring your car back to the same dyno over and over to measure those differences. But if you're going to do it 1 year and then 2 years down the line, you meet a guy in a parking lot that says he did this much on a certain kind of dyno and you want to compare against each other, honestly, I would say don't. That's not even close to being accurate. And look at my numbers from Dynacom versus Mustang. I'm 100 horsepower and 50 foot-pounds of torque different between those two. That's insane. And it also makes me believe that maybe my real numbers are a little lower than those new high ones that we got here, because who knows, what if I put the car in a dyno jet now? What would that put down? I feel like you just need to be a little bit willing to understand that it's a ballpark. Now in hindsight, have I been on a wild goose chase after I got those first round of dyno figures last fall? Yeah, maybe, but you know what? I don't regret anything at all. That was an awesome experience. It gave me a reason to get motivated and learn a lot of stuff about the car, and that's what this channel is all about. I love just being in the garage, trying new things and buying new equipment for the car and sharing knowledge back with you, because without that, I wouldn't have learned how to do a leak down test. I didn't know how at the time to use VCDS to check my timing or what fuel trim even was, when we figured all that out. I also did the entire SAI delete. I got the Jackal intake because I felt good about the car and I thought it was worth pursuing even further. And I learned how to make that duct in the bottom to bring in air. And I did the entire exhaust project with Fast Intentions and met the guys at Custom Powder Solutions to do the ceramic coating. It was just well worth the journey. And once again, it is the time of the year where the S4 needs to go to sleep for the winter. I'm going to stick it in the corner of the garage. The insurance is coming off and she's not coming back till probably March of 2024. And in the meantime, I get to turn my attention back to the projects that I kind of wish I was working on this entire time, but that's okay. It's given me some more time to plan on it. And I don't know what you're going to see next. You're either going to see an introduction series on the new car that I'm sure you already know at this point because it's been around, or I'm going to get back to the S8 because after all, while it's away for the winter though, and you're watching this episode and the rest in the series, hit me up in the comments. I read pretty much everything. I selectively answer them if it's worthwhile, but let me know what you want to see on the S4. I've definitely got some ideas of what the future might hold for this car, but now that I know that it's in good shape and I can continue to push it, I mean, there's lots of options out there for sure. But I want to hear from you, and I love hearing from you guys, so just let me know. As I say at the end of every video, but I truly, truly mean, thank you for watching. I really do appreciate if you're subscribed, when you like the video. It goes a long way. It gives me the motivation to continue doing these things. It doesn't take an insignificant amount of my time to put these together for every project. So thank you very much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.